Hello everyone and welcome back to Mysterious Murmurs. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1: The House of Unspoken Memories. Emily wasn't sure why she attended Uncle Thomas's funeral. She had no fond memories of the man, and as far as she knew, no one else did either. Her parents had always spoken of him in hushed tones, describing him as eccentric and unpredictable. When the lawyer handed her the deed to the Whitlock estate, she almost refused. She wasn't sure if she could handle inheriting a crumbling relic of a mansion, especially one so isolated. Yet curiosity, or perhaps duty, urged her to visit it. Underscore 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 arrival at Whitlock Mansion. The mansion's first impression was more haunting than majestic. The sprawling estate stood in defiance of time, its towering spires clawing at the gray sky. Ivy choked the stone walls, and dead leaves littered the overgrown lawn. Emily hesitated on the porch, the massive oak door looming before her. She unlocked it and stepped inside, greeted by a cold, hollow silence. Inside, the house was disturbingly pristine, as though someone had been expecting her. Dust motes floated lazily in beams of dim light filtering through stained glass windows. The furniture, though outdated, seemed well kept. She wandered the halls, her footsteps swallowed by the cavernous interior. It wasn't long before she noticed the photographs. Underscore 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 the changing photographs. The first photograph Emily saw was a black and white portrait of a family, a stern-looking man, a woman with hollow eyes, and a boy holding a small dog. The family's expressions seemed neutral at first glance, but the longer she stared, the more disquieting they became. By the next morning, something was off. The boy in the photograph, who had been seated, was now standing. Emily froze, her breath catching. She told herself it was fatigue, her mind playing tricks. But as the days passed, more photographs began to shift. In one, a young woman knitting in a chair now appeared to have stopped mid-stitch, her gaze fixed intently on Emily. In another, a couple who had been seated on a bench now stood at opposite ends of the frame, their faces blurred with motion. Emily's unease grew into paranoia. Underscore 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 the house's history. Determined to understand, Emily spent her nights in the attic, poring over the house's archives. She found old receipts, faded postcards, and yellowed letters, piecing together the mansion's dark past. The house had been a sanctuary, a place for society's unwanted, orphans, widows, and wanderers. She found Thomas's journals tucked beneath loose floorboards in his study. The entries started benign, describing his intentions to create a haven for the forgotten. But they grew darker. The house is changing. It remembers them. It remembers me. I can feel it watching. Underscore 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 trapped in the mansion one night. As she was exploring the west wing, Emily stumbled upon a door she hadn't noticed before. Behind it was a room filled with mirrors of all shapes and sizes. The frames were ornate, their glass surfaces oddly murky. In the largest mirror, she saw a reflection, but something was wrong. The reflection lingered a fraction of a second longer than her movements, her face twisted in an expression she wasn't making. She backed away, the sound of her breath loud in her ears. As she turned to leave, she noticed a photograph on a nearby table. Her blood ran cold. It was of her. The whispers began that night. Soft at first, like the rustling of leaves, but soon distinct enough to make out words. They called her name, pleading and insistent. Emily, help us. Don't leave. Stay with us. Sleep became impossible. Each morning, she found herself drawn to the photographs. The faces stared back at her, their eyes following her movements. By the third week, she could barely recognize the house she had entered. The halls seemed to stretch longer, the walls shifting subtly, funneling her toward places she didn't want to go. Emily's breaking point came when she woke to find her own face staring back at her from every photograph. The portraits, once filled with strangers, now reflected her alone. Each frame captured her in different states, standing in the kitchen, sitting by the fireplace, or staring out a window. She smashed one of the frames in desperation, only to find her image staring back from the shattered glass. Underscore 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 underscore. The final mirror. The house seemed to pulse with life as Emily approached the mirror room again. Her heart pounded, the whispers now a cacophony. Standing before the largest mirror, she saw herself, but not as she was. Her reflection was pale, her eyes sunken, her lips moving soundlessly. Slowly, it raised a hand to the glass. Emily tried to step back, but her feet wouldn't move. The mirror's surface rippled, and her reflection smiled. "You belong here now," it whispered. The last thing Emily felt was a cold hand closing around hers, pulling her into the glass. Underscore 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 underscore. Epilogue. The mansion sits in silence once more, its windows dark, its doors locked. New photographs hang on the walls, and among them is a picture of Emily, her face frozen in an expression of terror. Somewhere deep within the house, the whispers begin again, waiting for the next soul to cross the threshold. Story 2, The Hushed Choir. Tom Winter wasn't particularly superstitious. As a history teacher, his passions were rooted in uncovering truths buried under centuries of myth. Facts, he told his students, were far more frightening than folklore. And yet, something about the cathedral and windmere tugged at him in a way he couldn't explain. He first heard of it during a faculty luncheon. His colleague, Janet, had leaned in conspiratorially, wine glass in hand, and whispered, "Have you heard about St. Hilda's Cathedral? The place they sealed up back in the 50s? Tom hadn't, but her tone, half spooked, half giddy, piqued his interest. "It's just an old ruin," she continued. "Some tragic accident with the choir. Apparently, they were practicing late one night, and, well, no one knows exactly what happened. But they were never seen again. The church was abandoned not long after." "Urban legend," Tom said dismissively. But even as he spoke, he felt a prick of curiosity. Later that night, alone in his small apartment, he pulled up every article and document he could find about St. Hilda's. The accounts were vague, contradictory. Some said the choir had perished in a fire, others spoke of a collapse, and a few hinted at something far stranger. What was consistent was this: the church had been boarded up within weeks of the incident, and no one had dared to reopen it since. Windmere was a dreary town, its cobblestone streets and gray skies lending it an air of perpetual gloom. Tom visited on a chilly autumn morning, the air sharp with the smell of decaying leaves. St. Hilda's loomed at the edge of the town square, its Gothic spires blackened with age. Vines crawled up its stone facade, and its massive wooden doors were barred with rusting chains. A sign nailed to the door read, "No trespassing by order of the council." Tom stood there for a long moment, his breath fogging in the cold air. He could almost hear it, a faint melody, just at the edge of perception. "You won't find much there," a voice said behind him. He turned to see an elderly man leaning on a cane, his milky eyes staring past him. "The choir," the man continued, his voice low and gravelly. "They sang too beautifully. That's what they say. Their voices reached places they shouldn't have." Tom frowned. "What does that mean?" The man shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Some doors, once opened, can't be shut." Tom wasn't sure what compelled him to break into the cathedral. Maybe it was the melody he swore he heard every time he walked by, a haunting tune that seemed to call his name. Or maybe it was the diary he found in the town library, written by the choir director in the weeks leading up to the tragedy. In the diary, the director described the choir's rehearsals with increasing unease. He wrote of how their harmonies grew impossibly perfect, how their voices seemed to echo longer than they should. "They are changing," one entry read. "Becoming something else. The music is alive." Tom felt a shiver of both dread and excitement as he read. He had to know more. Breaking into St. Hilda's was easier than Tom expected. The chains on the doors were old and brittle, snapping with little resistance. Inside, the cathedral was eerily preserved, as though frozen in time. Dust blanketed the pews, and the air was heavy with the scent of mildew and something faintly sweet, like decayed flowers. The altar was covered in strange markings, symbols etched deep into the stone. Tom traced them with his fingers, their patterns both beautiful and unsettling. Then he heard it, singing. It was faint at first, like the wind whispering through the cracks in the walls. But as Tom moved deeper into the cathedral, the sound grew stronger. The voices were ethereal, otherworldly, harmonizing in a way that made his chest ache with both fear and longing. "Hello," he called out, his voice trembling. The singing stopped. As Tom explored the cathedral, he found a hidden passage behind the altar. The narrow staircase descended into darkness, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, he found a small chamber filled with strange artifacts, a cracked chalice, a tarnished bell, and an ancient music box. The music box was open, its tiny ballerina spinning to an inaudible tune. Tom felt an overwhelming urge to wind it. The moment he did, the singing returned, louder this time, and impossibly close. The walls of the chamber seemed to vibrate with the sound, the cymbals glowing faintly in the dim light. And then he saw them, shadowy figures emerging from the walls, their forms flickering like candle flames. "Join us," they whispered in unison. The rest of the story would delve into Tom's slow unraveling as he becomes entangled with the choir's haunting melody. He would discover that the figures are the remnants of the vanished choir, trapped in a liminal space between life and death. The cathedral, it turns out, is a doorway to this other realm, and the choir's perfect harmony was the key that unlocked it. Tom would try to escape, but the music would follow him, growing louder and more insistent. The story would end with him succumbing to the melody, his voice joining the choir as he fades into shadow. Story 3: The Clockmaker's Shadow. Marcus Blackwell inherited the clock on an overcast afternoon, the kind of day where the sky seemed burdened by unspoken secrets. His great-uncle Cedric had passed unexpectedly, leaving him the only heir to a dilapidated Victorian house in the heart of Windermere and, curiously, an antique grandfather clock. The clock arrived at Marcus's workshop in a crate, its oak frame swaddled in layers of brittle canvas. Marcus had seen thousands of clocks in his 35 years as a clockmaker, but this one gave him pause. Its design was striking, yet unsettling, a Gothic masterpiece with intricate carvings of twisting vines and snarling gargoyle faces. "Strange piece," muttered the delivery man as he helped Marcus unload it. "Never seen a clock strike 13 before." Marcus's heart skipped. 13? "Yeah," the man said with a shrug. "Got there just as the old housekeeper set it off. Damn thing started chiming. Loud as a church bell." The man left before Marcus could question him further. Alone in the dim light of his workshop, Marcus examined the clock closely. Its surface was polished to a deep mahogany shine, and the hands of its tarnished brass face pointed to 12. The pendulum, shaped like a grinning skull, hung still. That night, Marcus stayed late at the shop, intent on repairing the clock. It was far older than anything he'd worked on before, its inner mechanisms worn but strangely intact. He wound it carefully, noting the heavy resistance as the gears clicked into place. The moment he finished, the clock began to tick. A chill ran down his spine as the pendulum swayed in its hollow casing, its movement precise but somehow unnatural, as though an unseen hand guided it. He stood back, waiting for the chime. When midnight struck, the sound was deafening, a deep, resonant toll that reverberated through the room. But instead of 12 chimes, the clock rang 13. Marcus froze. The final chime seemed to linger in the air, a mournful echo that refused to fade. As the sound dissipated, the workshop grew eerily silent, the kind of silence that felt alive. That was when Marcus noticed the shadow. It stretched across the far wall, distorted and unnatural, as though cast by a figure that wasn't there. He spun around, but the room was empty. Over the following days, Marcus became obsessed with the clock. It refused to keep proper time, its hands spinning too quickly or stopping altogether. The chimes grew louder, almost as if mocking him, and always ended on that cursed 13th toll. Frustrated, he decided to dismantle it. Removing the clock's back panel revealed an intricate web of gears, each one etched with strange runes. But as Marcus peered deeper, his stomach turned. Embedded within the gears were fragments of bone, small, white, unmistakably human. Teeth. He recoiled, nearly dropping the panel. His hands shook as he examined the fragments more closely. They were old, worn smooth by years of grinding against the metal. Why would anyone do this? That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. The clock's incessant ticking echoed in his mind, a rhythmic taunt that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. Underscore 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 underscore. The warping of time. The changes began subtly. Marcus would glance at the shop clock and find hours had passed without his notice. Days felt shorter, nights unnervingly long. Customers complained of missing appointments, blaming his repairs for their sudden tardiness. "Your clocks are broken," one man snapped. "They're not," Marcus replied, though he wasn't sure anymore. The grandfather clock became his fixation. He spent every waking moment studying it, convinced it held the answer to the strange occurrences. But the more he tinkered, the more time seemed to slip through his fingers. By the third week, Marcus noticed the shadows. At first, they were fleeting, dark shapes at the edges of his vision. But soon, they became bolder. One evening, as he worked late, he saw a shadow move across the room, though no one was there. The shadows began to take form, resembling figures from Marcus's past, an angry customer, an estranged friend, the face of a man he'd cheated during a business deal years ago. Underscore 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 the 13th toll. As the clock's chimes grew louder, so did the figure's presence. Marcus started hearing whispers, low, guttural voices that spoke his name, accusing him of his past misdeeds. He tried to ignore them, but they grew more insistent, their words burrowing into his mind. Liar. Thief. Coward. One night, as the clock struck 13, the shadows emerged fully. They were no longer wisps of darkness but tangible, grotesque forms. One had the face of a woman Marcus had betrayed, her eyes hollow and accusing. Another was a childhood bully, his features twisted into a permanent sneer. They circled Marcus, their voices blending into a cacophony of accusations. He backed away, but they followed, their hands outstretched. "Leave me alone," he screamed. The figures stopped, their heads turning in unison toward the clock. It began to chime again, its sound deafening. With each toll, the shadows grew darker, more solid. Marcus realized, with dawning horror, that they weren't just haunting him, they were becoming him. Underscore 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 trapped inside time. On the final night, Marcus resolved to destroy the clock. He grabbed a hammer, his hands trembling as he approached the cursed timepiece. But before he could strike, the clock began to tick faster, its hands spinning wildly. The shadows surged forward, their forms blending into a swirling vortex of darkness. The clock struck 13. Marcus felt himself being pulled into the darkness, his body dissolving like sand in the wind. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the chime. When the 13th toll faded, the shop was silent. Inside the clock's face, a faint reflection appeared, Marcus, his eyes wide with terror, trapped behind the glass. The clock began to tick again, its pendulum swinging steadily. And in the stillness of the shop, the shadows began to stir once more. Story 4, The House of Unspoken Memories. Emily Carter stood at the edge of the overgrown driveway, staring at the mansion that now belonged to her. The house loomed like a sentinel of forgotten times, its dark windows reflecting the pale gray of the sky. It was massive, with steep gables and ivy snaking up its stone walls. The front door, weathered and imposing, seemed to dare her to step inside. She clutched the old brass key in her hand, its intricate design cool against her skin. The lawyer had delivered it to her the day before, along with the news of her estranged uncle's passing. Uncle Richard, a man she hadn't seen since childhood, had left her everything, the house, its contents, and an unsettling legacy she was only beginning to comprehend. "I never even knew him," Emily murmured to herself, the words swallowed by the wind. Her footsteps crunched on the gravel as she approached the front door. The house seemed alive, its walls exuding a strange, almost watchful presence. She pushed the key into the lock, the heavy mechanism groaning in protest as the door swung open. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old wood and something faintly metallic. Dust motes danced in the beams of light streaming through the tall windows. The foyer was cavernous, its polished floors reflecting the intricate chandelier that hung above. Emily's gaze was drawn to the photographs lining the walls. Black and white portraits of men, women, and children stared back at her. Their expressions were solemn, their eyes eerily vivid despite the aged paper. "Creepy," she muttered, shivering as she walked further inside. Over the next few days, Emily settled into the mansion. She explored its endless rooms, each one filled with antique furniture and relics of a life she could barely imagine. The library was her favorite, a sprawling space with towering shelves and plush armchairs that invited her to lose herself in dusty books. But the photographs unnerved her. They were everywhere, lining the hallways and clustered on mantels. At first, she thought nothing of it. Rich people liked their eccentric collections, right? Then she noticed the changes. On her second morning in the house, she passed by the foyer and froze. The photograph of a young boy holding a toy train looked different. The boy's head was tilted, his gaze no longer fixed straight ahead but slightly to the left, as if he were watching something just out of frame. Emily frowned, leaning closer. Did I imagine that? The next day, it happened again. This time, the elderly woman in the photograph by the dining room door seemed to have turned her head ever so slightly. Her lips, once pressed into a stern line, now curved upward in the faintest hint of a smile. By the third day, Emily was sure of it. The people in the photographs were moving. Desperate for answers, Emily delved into the house's history. She spent hours in the library, poring over letters, journals, and faded newspaper clippings. The mansion had been built in the late 1800s by her great-grandfather, a wealthy industrialist. Over the decades, it had passed through the family, its ownership always shrouded in mystery. One journal entry caught her eye. It was written by a woman named Eleanor, dated 1923. They come to me at night, their voices soft as whispers. The walls remember, they say. The mirrors keep their secrets. I am not alone here, though the house is empty. Emily's skin prickled. She flipped through more pages, finding similar entries. One described the house as a refuge for the forgotten, a sanctuary for those abandoned by their families. Another spoke of a strange energy, a pull that seemed to trap anyone who stayed too long. The more Emily read, the more the house's unsettling presence made sense. That evening, Emily sat in the parlor, staring at the fireplace. The flames crackled and danced, casting shadows that seemed to flicker with unnatural intent. I'm losing it, she said aloud. But deep down, she knew she wasn't imagining things. The photographs weren't just moving, they were watching her. She felt their eyes on her as she moved through the house, an unshakable sensation of being observed. One night, she woke to the sound of footsteps echoing down the hall. Heart pounding, she grabbed a flashlight and crept out of bed. The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the long corridor lined with photographs. The footsteps stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. Emily turned, her flashlight landing on a photograph of a middle-aged man. His face was pressed against the glass, his eyes wide with terror. Emily screamed. Over the next week, the house began to change. Doors that had once led to certain rooms now opened to entirely different spaces. The library shifted to the opposite wing, and the staircase leading to the attic disappeared altogether. The house was alive, and it didn't want her to leave. Emily tried to call for help, but her phone had no signal. The landline was dead, and the roads leading to the property seemed to stretch endlessly, looping back to the mansion no matter which direction she drove. She was trapped. Underscore 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 underscore. The final straw came one morning when Emily woke to find a new photograph hanging in the hallway outside her bedroom. It was a picture of her, standing in the foyer on the day she arrived. Her heart raced as she leaned closer. The image wasn't just a snapshot, it was alive. Her photographed self blinked, her lips moving soundlessly. That night, she avoided the mirrors, afraid of what she might see. But curiosity got the better of her. As she brushed her teeth before bed, she glanced up. Her reflection was gone. Instead, the mirror showed the hallway behind her, the photographs lining the walls. And in every frame, the people smiled. Story 5, The Room Between Worlds. Ava adjusted the straps of her backpack and looked up at the aging apartment building. Its cracked facade and peeling paint gave it an eerie charm, but the rent was cheap, and cheap was what she needed. As a freelance graphic designer, her income fluctuated wildly, and saving money meant compromising on luxuries. "This place has potential," she muttered, trying to convince herself. The landlord, Mr. Grayson, was waiting by the entrance, jingling a set of keys. He was a wiry man with a patchy beard and a nervous energy that made Ava uneasy. "You'll like it here," he said, his voice tight. "Quiet. Good for work." As he led her inside, Ava noticed how the dim hallway smelled faintly of mildew. The elevator groaned as they ascended to the 4th floor. "This is it," Mr. Grayson announced, stopping in front of a weathered green door. He inserted the key, hesitated, and then turned it with a click. The apartment was small but functional, a living room with a kitchenette, a modest bedroom, and a bathroom. Sunlight streamed through the grimy windows, casting a pale glow over the scuffed wooden floors. Ava walked through the space, nodding. "It'll do." "There's just one thing," Mr. Grayson said, his tone shifting. He pointed to a locked door at the end of the hallway. "That door stays locked. It doesn't go anywhere. No need to mess with it." Ava frowned. "What's behind it?" "Nothing." His reply was abrupt, almost rehearsed. "It's just a leftover from renovations. Don't worry about it." He handed her the keys and left without another word. Underscore 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 underscore. The whispers begin. Ava settled in quickly, unpacking her belongings and arranging her furniture. She spent most of her first evening working on a client project, the soft hum of her laptop filling the quiet apartment, but as the night deepened, the silence grew oppressive. Around midnight, Ava heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible, coming from the direction of the locked door. She froze, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. Probably just the pipes, she told herself, but the sound persisted, low and insistent. Curiosity gnawed at her. She approached the door, pressing her ear against the cool wood. The whispers grew clearer, a chorus of overlapping voices speaking words she couldn't understand. A chill ran down her spine. She stepped back, shaking her head. "It's nothing," she muttered, retreating to her bedroom. But the whispers stayed with her, echoing in her mind as she tried to sleep. "The door opens for days." Ava avoided the locked door, but the whispers continued, growing louder each night. She tried to ignore them, focusing on her work, but her curiosity became unbearable. One evening, after finishing a long project, she found herself standing in front of the door. The voices seemed to call her name, beckoning her closer. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. It was locked, of course. But then she noticed something she hadn't before, faint scratches around the keyhole, as if someone had tried to force it open. Impulsively, she grabbed a bobby pin from her desk and began fiddling with the lock. After several tense minutes, there was a satisfying click. The door creaked open, revealing darkness. Ava hesitated, her pulse quickening. She stepped inside and flipped the light switch on the wall. The room was her apartment. At least, it looked like her apartment, but something was off. The walls pulsed faintly, as if alive, and the air was heavy, making it hard to breathe. Her furniture was there, but slightly rearranged. A coffee mug sat on the table, identical to the one in her real kitchen. Ava's unease deepened as she noticed small, unsettling details. The clock on the wall ticked backward, and the mirror in the bathroom reflected nothing but static. The other side. Over the next few days, Ava couldn't stop thinking about the strange room. She returned to it several times, each visit leaving her more disoriented. The whispers had stopped, but the room itself felt alive. The pulsing walls seemed to respond to her presence, and she noticed objects from the other side appearing in her real apartment, a book she didn't recognize on her nightstand, a pair of shoes by the door that weren't hers. And every time she entered the room, she felt weaker. Her limbs grew heavy, her vision blurred, and a deep fatigue settled in her bones. Reality shifts. One evening, Ava returned from the other side to find her real apartment subtly changed. The paint on the walls was a different shade, and the view from the window showed a street she didn't recognize. Panic set in as she realized she wasn't entirely sure which side she was on anymore. Desperate, she tried to lock the door again, but the key had vanished. The objects from the other side continued to multiply, her real belongings slowly replaced by their distorted counterparts. A vase appeared on her table, filled with flowers that wilted and rebloomed in an endless cycle. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror began to mimic her movements with a strange delay, as if it were watching her, calculating. Underscore 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 underscore. The final visit. Ava knew she had to stop going through the door, but the pull was irresistible. The whispers had returned, louder and more frantic, urging her to come back. One night, unable to resist, she stepped into the room again. This time, the door slammed shut behind her, and the pulsing walls closed in, forcing her toward the mirror. She looked into it and saw her real apartment on the other side. Her reflection stared back at her, smiling. Ava screamed, pounding on the glass, but her reflection didn't move. Instead, it walked away, disappearing into the apartment she had once called home. Underscore 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 underscore. The locked door. The next morning, a new tenant arrived, led by Mr. Grayson. "This is the place," he said, jangling the keys. The tenant noticed the locked door at the end of the hallway. "What's behind that?" "Nothing," Mr. Grayson replied, his voice tight. "Just a leftover from renovations." From behind the door, faint whispers began to echo.